My name is Roy Donovan. I'm 35 years old and serve as a staff sergeant in U.S. Army intelligence specializing in counterterrorism for the past 14 years. I've dismantled networks in war zones and traced lies through firewalls. But nothing prepared me for the mission that began with a smile fading from a family photo. While deployed on my third tour, I realized my wife Bridget had grown distant, too distant. Our calls grew short, her stories thin. What started as suspicion became something darker, something that followed me from the battlefield straight into my children's bedrooms. And that's when I knew the war had followed me home. Suspicion doesn't announce itself with alarms. It doesn't kick down the door shouting accusations. It arrives slowly, silent as ash, steady as rot. It drifts into the corners of your life like dust settling on untouched shelves, until every breath you take tastes faintly of doubt, and you don't even remember what clean air felt like. I didn't suspect Bridget all at once. No. It came in pieces, small, sharp pieces that lodged themselves in my ribs and stayed there. The first fragment, a scent, sharp, citrusy, unfamiliar. It clung to the steam in our bathroom, expensive and masculine. Definitely not mine. She laughed when I asked. "It's just a department store sample," she said, flicking her wrist like it was nothing. I nodded, smiled, pretended that explanation didn't sound like a script, but inside something recoiled. Believing her felt like stepping into an open field without cover, reckless, dangerous, fatal. Then came the paper trail. Receipts folded between gas station slips and milk runs, only they weren't from anywhere near our town. Dinners for two. Upscale restaurants. Reservations at places she'd never mentioned, names she never dropped in passing. When I asked her, answers were too quick, too smooth. "A girls' night," she said once. "New coworker," she added another time. The names changed, but the tempo of her smile stayed the same. Rehearsed, polished, too practiced to be innocent. "You're paranoid, Roy," she told me. "You see threats in everything. That's what war does to people like you." Maybe she was right. 14 years in intelligence taught me to read silence louder than screams. I was trained to recognize deception, not in enemy uniforms, but in pauses, micro-expressions, inconsistencies. Still, I wanted her to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong, but patterns don't lie. Only people do. So I shifted, from husband to hunter. My team used to call me the bloodhound. I could track movements through a single misstep. I could build entire narratives from discarded fragments. So I turned that skill inward toward my own home. From a field base called Endurance, I launched quiet surveillance. Not vengeance, not yet. Just information. I slipped into our network via encrypted channels, watched IP pings, app histories, location pings. I activated the motion camera I'd installed years ago when deployments kept me away. Initially, it was for her safety. Now it was for clarity. And clarity came slow, brutal, undeniable. Footage showed her home during hours she claimed to be at work. Sometimes she was alone. Other times she wasn't. A jacket appeared slung over the back of my chair. Men's shoes I didn't own in the hallway. 2 wine glasses left rinsed beside the sink. Once I saw her pause, glance at the camera. Not with guilt, but with calculation. That chilled me more than anything. And then the moment that shattered the last of my restraint. It was 2:14 a.m. in Virginia. I was halfway across the world, winding down after a flawless mission. I logged in out of habit. The screen lit up. There she was, walking into our bedroom, hair tousled, barefoot, smiling. Behind her, a man followed. He laughed, the casual kind, the laughter of someone who's been there before, who's comfortable, who belongs. He touched her back like he knew the shape of it. They drank from my wine, sat on our bed. I didn't move, didn't curse, just observed, like I would an enemy's operation. No rage, no sound, just data collection. Because this wasn't heartbreak, it was infiltration. And Bridget, she was compromised. So I did what soldiers do. I planned. When the mission wrapped, my commanding officer offered me leave. I declined. I need time to prepare, sir, because I wasn't going home to ask for the truth anymore. I was going home to extract it, strategically, precisely, and without mercy. Coming home wasn't a return, it was reconnaissance. There were no welcome hugs, no tearful reunions. I didn't carry roses. I carried encrypted hard drives, burner phones, a satellite uplink, and a brain trained to detect lies buried in silence. The man who stepped off that plane wasn't Roy Donovan, the loving husband. He was the strategist, the operative, the man who knew too well that threats don't always wear uniforms. They sometimes wear your wedding ring. I rented an apartment exactly 15 minutes from my former home. Neutral ground. From that moment, it became my forward operating base. Lewis Frost, my closest friend, and a comms expert with top-tier clearance flew in to assist. He didn't offer comfort. He brought tools, silent, precise, deadly. "You really want to go through with this?" Lewis asked as we triple encrypted a laptop behind blackout curtains. I didn't flinch. I don't move without intel. I don't accuse without evidence. You know that. For the next 8 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. At base, I was the disciplined soldier. But by night, I was a hunter, meticulous, relentless. I combed through credit card charges, scraped metadata from Bridget's photo backups, pulled geolocation history from our shared mobile plan. I aligned timestamps from the home security feed with her supposedly busy calendar. And what I uncovered wasn't subtle. It was blatant, like they never thought I'd look. His name was Perry Wexler, the charming new neighbor, smooth talker, gym enthusiast, parent volunteers at school. He appeared 11 months ago, conveniently close to when Bridget started reading again and attending a book club that somehow required new heels and perfume. Her car pinged at the gym long after business hours. GPS logs showed it parked in dark corners for hours. I obtained surveillance footage his car parked nearby minutes apart. Same exit, same smirk. But it wasn't the visuals that gutted me. It was the audio. Pulled from an old baby monitor I reactivated and planted in the nursery. Low frequency, high clarity. Enough to catch whispers they thought were private. "Roy's overseas until November," Bridget murmured. "Once the divorce is filed with his deployments, the court will grant him maybe 1 weekend a month." "Tops, you sure about this?" Perry asked. His tone calculated, too calm. "He's not a hero," she replied. "He chose war over his family a long time ago. It wasn't heartbreak. It was premeditation. They weren't just having an affair, they were running a long con, a calculated campaign, and I was the target. But I didn't stop there. Because when the scent turns strong, a bloodhound doesn't retreat. He digs deeper, and what I uncovered next transformed personal betrayal into something far more sinister. Perry Wexler didn't exist, at least not in any way that made sense. No tax records, no clean employment history. His social media looked legit, but it was too legit. Every photo too polished, every friend connection too recent, a digital mask. So I called in favors, quiet ones. Accessed encrypted military intelligence databases using level 6 clearance under the guise of cross-referencing personnel in proximity to domestic assets. And then it hit me. Offshore shell accounts, alias-linked data structures, a buried flag connecting him to an inactive intel network flagged for unauthorized civilian engagement. I stared at the screen, heart thudding like a drumline. This wasn't about Bridget anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about leverage, access, national security. Later that night, Lewis sat across from me in the dim light of our makeshift war room. He'd read the same files, drank the same black coffee. His face was pale. "This isn't just about a cheating spouse," he said quietly. "This guy's embedded. He's using your family, your address, your clearance." I nodded, shutting the laptop with slow finality. For the first time since this started, something cracked beneath the surface. Rage. Controlled, sharp-edged rage. "He infiltrated the wrong house," I whispered. "And he underestimated the one man trained to dismantle entire operations from the inside out. Because this wasn't a love triangle anymore. It was an act of war." And I was done watching. Returning from base that night, I shut the apartment door behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. The lock clicked into place, a sound that once meant safety, but now felt like a barricade against the truth pressing in from all sides. I stood there in the quiet hum of the rented kitchen, staring at the war board on the far wall. Pinned photographs, GPS printouts, offshore bank transfers, metadata strings, tax audits, all woven together in a tapestry of betrayal and strategy. The lamplight cast harsh shadows across Perry Wexler's smiling face. The smile looked different now, almost taunting. My chest felt tight as I stepped closer, eyes scanning the board again, hunting for something. I might have missed some hidden link that would make this just an affair, just a broken marriage, just something human. But the patterns were too clean, too disciplined, each movement executed with operational precision that screamed training. Not random, never random. I pulled up his employment records again, scrolling through the fabricated degrees, the job titles built atop air. Universities that had no record of his enrollment. Hospitals he supposedly consulted for that listed no contracts under his ID. His LinkedIn profile constructed just 14 months ago. Every endorsement from a shell account. Every connection strategically selected for legitimacy. The tax records were what sealed it for me. At first glance normal, but then came deduction codes that didn't match reported income brackets, subtle, concealed in line items only someone trained in counterintelligence finance audits would catch. I felt the truth bloom cold and jagged in my chest. This wasn't infidelity. This wasn't love. This was infiltration, deep cover, strategic asset placement, and Bridget, my Bridget. She was either his target or his accomplice. I closed my eyes against the burning behind them, pressing my palms so hard to my sockets that sparks flared in the dark. The footage played on loop in my mind, her voice curling with contempt as she whispered to him, "He's no hero to me. He chose the army over us a long time ago." I thought about every sand-choked night I spent praying only to come home alive, desperate to kiss her hair and smell Max's sweat-sweet skin after soccer practice. I thought about how I used to wake before dawn just to watch her sleep in the quiet blue light, memorizing the curve of her mouth, that tiny scar above her brow from when Lily knocked her with a wooden spoon. I remembered kissing her belly when she carried Max, whispering that I would build a future safe enough to hold his dreams. I remembered Lily's tears the night before my second deployment. Her sobs shaking so hard, I thought her ribs would snap, and how Bridget had tucked her in and said, "It's okay, Daddy will always come home." Were they lies or truths she buried under loneliness and resentment until someone like Resnick unearthed them and offered softer answers? Answers that didn't require sacrifice. Answers that didn't come home covered in blood and sand. Because that was his real name. Resnick Pavel. his face blurred across a dozen flagged files in the Defense Intelligence Database. Known alias clusters across Eastern Europe. Last flagged in Warsaw, suspected GRU operative specializing in human asset cultivation. His MO: find the fracture, the lonely wife, the overlooked logistics officer, the unstable analyst. Seduce them. Expand the crack into a fault line wide enough to walk an entire operation through. And now he'd found mine. My jaw locked so tight, pain radiated down my neck. Fury pulsed beneath my ribs, hot and clean. This man had trespassed into everything I had bled for. My home, my children, my marriage, my very identity as a provider, a protector, a soldier. Behind me, Lewis sat silent, hunched over his own laptop, the glow painting his lined face with shadows of disbelief. He read the same file, saw the same fate. Jesus Christ, Roy. His voice trembled as he looked up. This isn't an affair. This is tradecraft. Full-scale asset compromise. Yeah, I rasped. My throat felt raw, shredded by truths I didn't want to name. Yeah, it is. Lewis swallowed hard. So what's next? I turned to face him, feeling the old steel settle into my bones like a returning tide. The part of me that once planned ambushes in Afghan mountain passes. The part that learned to breathe calm through rocket fire and broken ribs. The part that didn't blink at moral cost when the mission required clarity. I met his eyes and felt my voice return low and absolute. We do what we've always done, Lewis, I said. We finish the op. Because this wasn't heartbreak anymore. This wasn't betrayal. This was espionage. This was war, and the only rule in war is simple win. At any cost. The dawn came gray and silent the day I boarded the flight home on emergency leave. My orders said family crisis. That was true, just not in the way anyone imagined. On the tarmac, my CO clapped a hand on my shoulder. Remember your training, Roy. Facts first, emotion later. Facts first, emotion later. That became my mantra as the jet engines roared, carrying me east across oceans to a house I no longer recognized, to a woman whose smile I could barely remember, to children whose safety had become my only prayer. My palms sweated against the grips of my go bag. I wasn't going home. I was entering a battlefield. When I landed in Virginia, I didn't drive straight home. I checked into a motel 15 minutes away, laid out my gear on the sagging mattress like prepping for an op in Mosul or Ramadi, laptop, encrypted phone, hard copies of Resnick's false credentials, military-grade USB kill switch drives. Surveillance tools lined up next to the holster I wasn't allowed to carry off duty on US soil. But there are weapons beyond steel and gunpowder. Information is sharper, more permanent. I parked down the street from my own house at 2 a.m., watching warm yellow light spill from the bedroom window. My bedroom. Shadows moved behind the blinds. Her laughter drifted into the night air, muffled by glass and distance, but distinct. The same laugh she gave me when we danced in the kitchen with flour on our cheeks. That memory felt foreign now, a language I no longer spoke. I entered at dawn. Max and Lily woke, first sleepy smiles breaking into squeals as they flung themselves at me. Daddy Max's arms felt stronger than I remembered. Lily buried her face in my neck, her tears hot against my collar. For 5 minutes, I was just a father again. 5 minutes before reality returned with their innocent questions. Have you met Mr. Perry yet, Dad? He comes over a lot. My blood ran cold, but I kept my smile steady. Oh yeah. What does Mr. Perry do when he visits? He helps Mom fix things. And he's teaching me baseball. He said you were too busy fighting bad guys to teach me curveballs. A ringing started in my ears. I kissed the top of Max's head, willing my voice to remain calm. You'll have to show me what he taught you later, champ. Later that morning, I sent the children to a neighbor's for pancakes. I needed them gone for what came next. I walked into the kitchen. Bridget and Perry Resnick stood close, murmuring over coffee mugs that were wedding gifts from my mother. His hand rested on her hip. Hers moved to cover it reflexively. Intimate, practiced. "Roy," she gasped when she saw me, color draining from her face. Resnick turned with a smirk, his eyes scanning me top to bottom, cataloging threat level like I was doing to him. "You must be Roy," he said, with casual arrogance, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about you. I didn't take it." My voice came out low, almost gentle. "Funny. I've heard about you too, Pavel." His eyes narrowed infinitesimally, a flash of recognition he quickly buried under his practiced smile. But I saw it, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Bridget's lips trembled. "What are you talking about?" I ignored her. "You think you're running an op here, Resnick, using my wife, my kids." I took a step closer. "You've underestimated what a man like me becomes when you target what he loves." Bridget's voice rose in panic. "Roy, stop. He's just helping with the house. You're being paranoid again. Stop lying to me." The words came out clipped, edged with steel. "You don't even know who he is, do you? Her eyes darted to Resnick, searching for an answer, for reassurance. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence screamed the truth. In that moment, betrayal felt like acid coursing through my veins. But the soldier in me overrode the husband. My next words were delivered with chilling calm. "Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to leave this house today. My children will remain here with me. And Pavel." I leaned forward until I could smell his aftershave, a sterile chemical bite. "If you think for a second you're walking away from this clean, you don't understand the game you've entered." He blinked slowly, smile gone now. Calculating. Measuring his next move. "I'll be seeing you soon," I said. Then I walked past him to the front yard, breathing in the dawn air, as if it were the first clean breath I'd taken in months. Because in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. I sat in my truck across the street from my own house, the engine off the cold, seeping through the floorboards into my boots until I could no longer feel my toes. Outside, the morning sun climbed above the suburban rooftops, pale and sterile, illuminating neat lawns and trimmed hedges that had become camouflage for something rotten underneath. My reflection stared back at me in the cracked rearview mirror, a face hollowed by too many truths. Eyes sunken into shadows, dark beard grown uneven along a jaw clenched so tight it ached, uniform collar half unbuttoned and limp with fatigue. I hadn't slept, not even for a minute. All night I replayed Resnick's face behind my eyelids, memorizing every micro-expression like I was back in an interrogation cell. The flicker of confusion when I spoke his real name, the tightening around his mouth as he recalculated his options, the gleam of feral hatred when I told him it was over. A father's love is supposed to be soft, warm arms, lifting a crying child from nightmare gentle hands, tucking blankets under small chins. But in that dawn-drenched truck, my love felt like forged iron, like the weight of my service pistol pressed against my palm, though I hadn't carried it in months. It felt like the deliberate exhale before a sniper squeeze, cold, focused, absolute. Because Bridget's betrayal was no longer about heartbreak or humiliation. It was about national security. And my children, my Max, my Lily, stood in the blast radius of a battlefield they didn't even know existed. I thought about Max's shy grin as he showed me the new baseball grip Resnick had taught him, the way his small shoulders squared with pride. I thought about Lily's curls bouncing against her shoulders as she twirled in princess pajamas, her tiny voice bright with excitement, as she told me Mr. Perry brought ice cream last week when Mommy was sad. My throat burned with something deeper than rage, heavier than grief, a black hole in my chest where guilt collapsed in on itself. They didn't know. They couldn't know. And that ignorance was my failure to bear. I closed my eyes against the rising sun and saw them again, every insurgent I had interrogated in plywood rooms that smelled of sweat and gun oil. Every warlord whose lies I peeled away with questions delivered in quiet, lethal precision. Resnick was no different. He thought himself untouchable because he hid behind vanilla identities, because he wore civilian clothes and smiled like a neighbor, because he kissed like a lover and spoke like a savior. But infiltration was infiltration. Tradecraft was tradecraft, and he had exposed his pattern, revealed his objective, unlocked his operational weakness. Now it was my turn to prepare the counterattack. I reached for the spiral notepad lying on the passenger seat. Pages curled and stained with cheap coffee rings and fingerprints of engine grease. I flipped past hastily scribbled surveillance timestamps, GPS logs, fragments of overheard conversations, Resnick's known aliases cross-referenced with Humint files, Bridget's work calendar remapped against his passive tracking pings. Finally, I found a clean page, my operational checklist. The same checklist I used before dawn raids in Mosul, before black site captures in Aleppo, before quiet kills in places no one would ever find the bodies. My pen moved down the page, steady, methodical, objective confirmation, collateral assessment, counter-infiltration protocol, asset extraction plan, termination contingency. My hand trembled only once when I wrote her name under collaterals, Bridget Donovan, wife, mother, betrayer, because love and betrayal are two blades of the same knife honed along the same edge until one day you can no longer tell where devotion ends and destruction begins. She had chosen her side the moment she let him into their home, into their children's lives, into the fortress I had spent years building out of blood and absence. And now I was about to choose mine. I folded the page with slow precision, creasing each edge, sliding it into the inside pocket of my uniform, where operational orders always belonged, close to my heart, against my chest. A reminder of duty before desire. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, burning away the thin veil of dawn fog, revealing the world in ruthless clarity. The front yard stood quiet, the blinds still drawn. The world still asleep, ignorant of the war, raging within the soldier parked across the street. I started the engine. The diesel rumbled to life beneath me, vibrating up through my spine. I felt it settle my resolve like steel beams driven into the foundation of a crumbling house. The day stretched before me, sharp and infinite. Because this wasn't over. This was the quiet before retaliation. And I have always been at my most dangerous in the quiet. I walked into the courtroom that morning, not as a husband desperate to save a marriage, nor as a father pleading for scraps of custody time. I walked in as a soldier executing the final stage of a sting operation. The smell of varnished oak benches and ammonia floor polish rose around me, sharp and sterile, just like the mission briefing rooms before dawn raids. Each fluorescent bulb flickered above with the cold dispassion of interrogation lamps. My dress uniform felt heavier than usual, the metals aligned to regulation boots, mirror polished. Not for show, not to impress, but to remind myself who I was, who I still am. Across the aisle, Bridget sat with her hands clasped around a tissue knuckles white. Pearl earrings winked beneath the harsh lights like tiny twin lies. Her lawyer leaned in close, whispering with urgent precision. 2 rows behind them sat Resnick, legs crossed at the knee, one polished shoe bobbing lazily, as if this were just another Monday meeting. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, cufflinks glinting like fangs. His eyes found mine across the room, and his lips curved in a small, mocking smirk. A smirk that said, "You're too late." I stared back, pulse steady, breath even, but inside every muscle was coiled steel cable drawn so tight I could hear the blood roaring behind my eyes. The proceedings began with rehearsed civility, a veneer of order over a battlefield. Legal jargon filled the room: petitioner-respondent visitation schedules, parental competency evaluations. Words that once mattered. Words that now felt like flies buzzing over the carcass of my marriage. Veronica Slate, Bridget's attorney, rose gracefully in her navy suit and 5-inch heels, moving to the center floor with performative empathy. "Your Honor." She began gesturing toward me with manicured fingers. "My client's husband has spent his entire adult life in military intelligence. He sees threats where there are none, enemies in every shadow, betrayal in every missed call. This is not a man grounded in reality. This is a man trained to suspect." She paused dramatically, scanning the room for effect. "His paranoia has driven a wedge through this family. It has endangered the emotional well-being of his children." If only she knew how right she was. Franklin Dela Cruz. My attorney remained seated, legs crossed, calmly, his pen tapping once against the table before he rose. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "if it pleases the court, my client has prepared documentation bearing directly upon this hearing, on the safety of his children, and on matters significantly broader in scope." Judge Holbrook, a woman with iron gray hair and an expression honed by decades of seeing through lies, raised one thin eyebrow. "Proceed." I rose. Each step forward felt like wading through memories thick as blood. Baghdad's burning metal tang, the deafening silence after a roadside bomb, ears ringing with the ghosts of the fallen. Lily's tiny arms wrapped around my neck the night before my first deployment, sobbing into my collarbone. Bridget's lips pressed to mine in the pre-dawn chill, tasting like tears and coffee and promises. I laid the folder on the bench before the judge. My fingers left damp impressions against the blue cardstock. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Contained within is evidence concerning Mr. Wexler's true identity and operational purpose." Resnick shifted then. Only slightly. But I caught it. The tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth as the smirk died. His shoulders rolled back as if preparing for recoil. Judge Holbrook flipped through the pages slowly. Each turn revealed another fracture in his construct: passport scans under 6 different names. Offshore wire transfers linked to shell corporations flagged in counter-intel watch lists. A university diploma issued from an institution shuttered 12 years before its dated graduation. And finally, a classified memo flagged GRU, Human Asset, European Theater, active. Bridget's lips parted. A faint squeak left her throat as she turned to him, eyes wide with horror. What is this?" she whispered. Resnick didn't answer. His fingers curled into fists against his thighs, trembling with adrenaline. For the first time, I saw him as what he truly was. Not a lover, not a neighbor, but an operative calculating risk vectors, scanning for exits, weighing kill options against extraction routes. His eyes flicked across the room, seeking an opening, finding none. Bailiff Judge Holbrook said, her voice sharp enough to cut bone, "Close the doors. No one leaves this courtroom." Resnick stood abruptly. "This is a private custody matter. You have no jurisdiction over me." The bailiff's sidearm was out before Resnick finished his sentence. "Sir, sit down." 2 men in tailored dark suits entered from the rear doors, badges flashing under their coats, flanked by 2 MPs in tactical gear. The taller agent spoke first, his voice ringing with unshakable authority. Pavel Resnick, he said. You are under arrest for espionage against the United States of America. The room erupted into chaos. Bridget gasped, her chair scraping back with a screech. Slate's pen dropped to the floor and rolled beneath her seat. Resnick lunged sideways, but the MPs moved with predator speed, forcing him face first onto the polished oak floor, zip ties, cinching his wrists behind his back with a plastic snarl. His eyes found mine one final time, wild with animal fury, teeth bared in a silent snarl that promised revenge he would never have the chance to execute. I didn't blink. Bridget turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks, mascara carving black rivers across her pale skin. Roy, please, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. I said nothing. Because the words I wanted to say were too heavy for this room. Because in that moment, compassion felt like a tactical weakness. Because between us now stood a crater too wide for forgiveness to cross. Judge Holbrook banged her gavel, once the crack echoing off marble columns. Custody proceedings are suspended pending federal investigation. Temporary full custody is awarded to Sergeant Donovan. Court adjourned. As I walked out, the cold morning air wrapped around me like steel-plated armor. Each inhale burned down to my gut. This was not victory. This was only a phase shift in a larger operation. Resnick's arrest would send shockwaves through networks far beyond my small suburban street. Phones were already burning, drives already wiped. Somewhere handlers were rewriting protocols, repositioning assets, recalculating my existence into their risk assessments. I pulled out my phone and opened the last photo of Max and Lily, taken the morning I deployed. Max grinning in his Batman pajamas. Lily clutching his sleeve, both half asleep and unguarded in their trust. My fortress, my mission. I closed my eyes against the sting of cold wind. The gavel had fallen, the enemy identified, the battlefield mapped, and the next fight would not be waged in courtrooms or custody filings. It would be waged in shadows. And God help anyone standing between me and my children ever again. The federal investigation unfolded like a detonation in slow motion. The day after Resnick's arrest, my phone buzzed with encrypted briefings every hour, flagged aliases, intercepted communications, probable sleeper cells embedded along the eastern seaboard. His exposure cracked open an entire operational ring. At home, my world was no quieter. Max asked why Mommy cried when the men took Mr. Perry away. Lily refused to sleep in her room, curling up beside me each night, her small body trembling with questions she was too afraid to speak. The FBI set up a secure interview at headquarters. I sat across from Bridget, chained at the wrists, her mascara streaked down her cheeks in black rivulets. Roy, I didn't know. I thought he loved me. I thought. I held up a hand. Silence settled like ash between us. There were no words left to save her. The Bureau's lead agent listed her charges aiding and abetting a foreign operative obstruction failure to report suspicious activity. Her tears fell faster with each count. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. She had chosen her weakness, and now she would live inside it. 2 weeks later, a judge signed the custody transfer. Full legal and physical custody awarded to me. Bridget's visitation rights suspended indefinitely pending criminal prosecution. The kids didn't understand. Lily asked if Mommy was coming back. Max stayed silent, jaw clenched, as he packed away the Lego sets she had bought him. Days bled into weeks. The Army called me in for reassignment. Colonel Barrett studied me across his desk, medals glinting on his pressed blues. We're forming a new unit, Donovan. The Military Family Security Unit, focused on identifying infiltration attempts like Resnick's before they penetrate households, before they weaponize spouses and children. We need you. I sat there staring at the framed photos lining his office walls, smiling families, soldiers in formation, folded flags presented at funerals. My mind drifted to Max's steady gaze, to Lily's sleepy weight against my shoulder. They deserved a father who was present, who was vigilant, who used his training to build walls no enemy could ever breach again. "I accept," I said. My voice was calm, final, like mission confirmation over a comm channel. Barrett nodded. "Welcome to Metropolitan Financial State University, Staff Sergeant. Your battlefield just changed. But the mission remains the same: protect what matters most." Outside, the Virginia autumn sun burned weak through steel-gray clouds. I felt its thin warmth on my skin as I walked to my truck. Max's baseball glove sat on the passenger seat. Lily's pink scrunchie lay beside it. Two small reminders of the fortress I had to rebuild, not with stone or guns, but with vigilance, truth, and a love stronger than betrayal. This fallout wasn't just national, it was personal. And I would spend every remaining breath ensuring that the enemy would never reach my children again. After Resnick's arrest, after the courtroom chaos and federal takedowns, there was a silence I didn't trust. The headlines flared, "Foreign operative arrested in military espionage plot." My name was buried halfway down each article, Staff Sergeant Roy Donovan's source of initial intelligence tip-off. They didn't write the truth, that my family became a battlefield, that my children were nearly weaponized as assets, that I watched my wife become a liability I couldn't protect. At night, I lay awake listening to Max's restless tossing to Lily, whimpering in dreams she wouldn't remember. Sleep felt dangerous. Vulnerability felt lethal. Even with Resnick locked in a federal black site, his network unraveling cell by cell, I couldn't shake the sense of exposure. As if his ghost stalked each room whispering, "You'll never keep them safe. You'll always miss something." When MFSU called with the formal offer, I almost refused. Another war, another assignment, another set of names to carry in the quiet hours. But then I looked at Max, sitting on the porch steps, chin on his knees, silent in the bruised pink sunset. At Lily curled in the living room chair, clutching a stuffed unicorn worn thin by her grip. And I knew. If there was a unit hunting men like Resnick, I needed to be in it, because revenge fades. Justice falters, but vigilance is forever. That evening, I signed my acceptance papers under the harsh kitchen light, my reflection glaring back from the dark window. Not in uniform, not holding a rifle, but still a soldier. Always a soldier. Morning came gray and silent, the sky a slate canvas brushed with distant stormlight. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the ridged scars along my knuckles, feeling each pulse of blood beneath thin skin like a countdown I could never stop. The first day reporting to the agency headquarters felt like redeployment, except this time the battlefield wasn't a desert province or a sniper-pocked city block. It was my own home soil. And the targets here didn't wear tactical vests or ragged keffiyehs. They wore neighborly smiles, business casual, parent-teacher association badges, wedding rings. Driving through the security gate, I flashed my newly minted clearance badge to the guard, who barely glanced up from his checklist before waving me through. Past steel bollards and layered scanners, past the stone-faced MPs with rifles cradled loosely across armored chests. I walked alone, boots clicking on polished concrete floors. Analysts and officers moved in silent choreography around me, flicking their eyes up briefly to assess the newcomer. They knew my file by heart now. I wasn't an unknown quantity. I was the test case that survived. The proof that these networks could infiltrate deeper than anyone wanted to admit, and that a single man could dismantle them from the inside out. The official induction briefing lasted 3 hours in a windowless conference room, that smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. Protocols, compartmented channels, vetting procedures, psychological resilience assessments, threat evolution matrices. I nodded where required, signed what was placed before me, but my mind kept drifting to Resnick's face in the courtroom, livid teeth bared as agents dragged him away. "This isn't over, Donovan." He spat wrists, zip-tied eyes black with feral promise. "They always come back for what they failed to claim." Even now, his voice slithered through my mind, curling cold around my spine. After the briefing, they walked me down to the operations floor. It stretched the length of an aircraft hangar, humming with low conversation and machine noise. Rows upon rows of glowing monitors displayed active feeds, military base housing complexes in the Midwest. Flagged child protection logs from rural precincts, intercepted phishing, and social engineering scripts, dripping honeyed promises into desperate inboxes. Analysts hunched over keyboards, eyes flicking between threat maps and mission protocols, each alert blinking a silent warning that my story wasn't unique. That Bridget wasn't the first, that Resnick was only a single operative in an ocean of serpents. I stood there absorbing the scale, feeling my bones resonate with the unspoken knowledge I was just the proof of concept that fought back. When I returned home that evening, the sky had shifted from storm light to indigo dusk. The porch light glowed amber, casting long shadows across the driveway. Inside, Lily ran at me full speed, colliding into my ribs with a soft oof, her tiny arms wrapping tight around my waist. Max hovered in the kitchen doorway, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes darting up to meet mine, then away again. I knelt down, placing one hand on each of their small shoulders. "It's going to be different from now on," I told them softly, my voice thick with exhaustion. "Safer. Better." Lily beamed and nodded with the pure faith of a child. Max just watched me with those dark eyes, too old for his years, seeing more than I wished he could. As I ruffled his hair, a silent prayer burned through my chest. Please let them keep their innocence a little longer. Please let my sins remain mine alone. That night, after I tucked them in, checking windows, checking locks, checking motion sensors for the 5th time, I sat alone in my office, the glow of 3 monitors illuminating war maps of a hidden domestic battlefield. I reviewed security feeds, filtered new threat intelligence digests, refreshed military family infiltration reports. Patterns layered upon patterns. The digital clock ticked past midnight in soft red neon, a quiet reminder that time is never truly yours when you live in vigilance. Finally, I opened my private operational notes, typing a single line before fatigue claimed me. The enemy adapts. So must I. I closed the laptop with a muted snap, laid my sidearm on the desk within easy reach, and leaned back in the chair. My eyelids burned as they slid shut, muscles twitching with phantom adrenaline. Sleep came not as peace, but as darkness behind closed eyes, guarded, coiled, restless. Outside, the winds picked up, rattling the window frames with quiet threats of their own. Dawn would come soon, bringing new ghosts to chase new battlefields to map, and a fresh enemy already planning their infiltration. But I would be ready. Because this was no longer about winning. This was about enduring, and I was built for nothing else. Sleep came in ragged waves, crashing over me only to recede and leave me gasping in darkness. At 3:00 a.m., I jolted awake to the quiet creak of the house settling against its beams. My heart pounded so hard, I half expected to hear mortar rounds screaming through the walls, the old combat reflex igniting before I could think. Sweat chilled my spine. The sidearm lay on the nightstand within arm's reach. My fingers curled around its grip, the cold steel bleeding calm back into my veins. I sat there for long minutes, back against the headboard, listening to the house breathe the ticking of the baseboard heater. The sigh of Lily's bedroom door expanding in the night chill, the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Ordinary sounds of safety, but my mind cataloged them as threat vectors anyway. When dawn finally crawled over the rooftops in shades of tarnished silver, I brewed coffee strong enough to blister my tongue. The bitter burn grounded me better than prayer ever had. I sat at the kitchen table, bare feet, pressed into cold tile, reviewing the infiltration files flagged overnight by MFSU analysts. Slide after slide flickered across my laptop screen, blurred photos of children with forced smiles, metadata strings, highlighting flagged social engineering attempts, micro-pattern deviations in network traffic. Each image carved into me like a serrated blade scraping nerve against bone. Each line of code felt like a scream I couldn't silence. Max was the first to wake. He padded in on small feet that still slapped against the hardwood with childhood softness, wearing his faded Batman shirt hair sticking up at wild angles like broken feathers. He blinked at me blearily, eyes puffy with sleep. "Morning, Dad?" He mumbled, leaning against my arm, warm and solid and real. I ruffled his hair, letting my palm rest atop his scalp, feeling the ridges of his skull beneath the skin, memorizing the shape of his growth. "Anchor points," my mind whispered, as if mapping structural integrity. "Morning, champ," I replied, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Later, Lily appeared, drifting into the kitchen with the sleepy grace of a child who still believed mornings were gentle things. She crawled into my lap without a word, curling her knees against her chest, her small body radiating warmth that cut through the chill in my bones. I wrapped both arms around her, pressing my face into her hair. It smelled of strawberry shampoo and innocence. I closed my eyes against the sting gathering behind them. "Nothing will touch you," I whispered into her scalp, my lips brushing soft curls. "Not while I'm breathing." She didn't stir, didn't hear. But somewhere in the quiet chambers of her small heart, a part of her felt the vow. I hoped it would be enough. That day became an operational checklist of fortification. I installed reinforced locks on every ground floor window, tested the frame strength against crowbars and battery rams. I checked the panic room backup generator twice, listening to its low growl until I was certain it would hold through blackout or siege. Upstairs, I updated the firewall protocols on my home network, weaving digital barbed wire through every access point. I reset passwords to 256-character randomized strings, installed passive trackers on the kids' tablets, checked the placement of the motion sensors in the yard, switched out the front porch security cam for one with active facial recognition logging, because a fortress wasn't built of stone or guns. A fortress was built of vigilance, of discipline sharpened to a monastic edge, of the unbreakable will to stand watch forever. And as dusk fell over my quiet suburban street, painting the blinds in bruised twilight, I realized something that thudded heavy in my chest. This was no longer a house. It was an outpost, a last stronghold, and I was its sentinel. It began with a flagged message in the MFSU comms feed, buried among the chatter of phishing alerts and attempted infiltration scripts. My name caught in a line of metadata like a snare. Bridget, my ex-wife, incarcerated awaiting sentencing, confined to a cell small enough to match the life she'd tried to contain me in. But even there, walls meant nothing. She was communicating through a monitored prison account with an outside contact flagged as high risk. The contact, Resnick. The briefing room felt colder than any Afghan dawn as Agent Walsh scrolled through the transcript files on the screen. Dozens of short exchanges layered in coded phrasing, each one outwardly reading like fragments of grief poetry. Desperate apologies. Longing confessions. regret shaded in metaphors about light and winter, but the pattern analysts parsed them line by line, unspooling the cipher. Underneath the sorrow lay something mechanical, precise, lethal. Requests for my work schedules, my travel windows, unit operational deployments, even my personal protection details. I felt my skin burn cold. My fingertips tingled with adrenaline's hollow rage as I leaned forward, eyes scanning each decoded line. "She's using the kids," I said. My voice sounded alien to me, flat, drained, disembodied. "She's asking them questions during visits, isn't she?" Walsh nodded slowly, his lips tight with pity he knew better than to voice. "We have footage. Casual questions. Innocuous to any observer. Max answers everything. He's trying to protect her. Lily, she's too young to see the hooks in her words." My chest caved inward, ribcage crushing the air from my lungs. Max, my boy with his quiet loyalty, his desperate need to fix what he doesn't understand. And Lily curls bouncing as she babbled to her mother about bedtime routines and dinner guests. Innocence exploited. My fortress breached from within its own walls. Again. That night I sat alone in my office, the house silent around me except for the ticking of the wall clock and the low static hum of the baby monitor. I never disconnected, even now. Hours of visitation footage played on my laptop, each clip slicing deeper into flesh, already flayed raw. There was Bridget orange jumpsuit hidden beneath a cheap gray prison sweater. Her hair pulled back in a tight braid, earrings long gone, but her smile unchanged, honey-sweet, wolf-sharp. "Has Daddy been working late again?" she asked, voice pitched with playful concern as she spooned yogurt into Lily's tiny mouth. "Is Laura still coming over for dinner? What does she do on base, sweetie?" My pen cut a deep, ragged scar across the margin of my notepad as I wrote each phrase down in block letters. Evidence, pattern, tradecraft. The cold, mechanical part of me, the operator who built kill lists in desert bunkers, who read faces for lies before pulling triggers, processed it efficiently. Logged, cataloged, actionable. But the man inside me, the husband who once kissed salt tears from her cheeks, who whispered promises into her skin beneath wedding sheets, felt something shatter into ash. When dawn broke the sky, the color of old bruises, I filed the official report. My recommendation was absolute immediate suspension of visitation rights. Her manipulation wasn't betrayal alone. It was operational endangerment. The kids weren't her children anymore in those moments. They were assets, tools, entry points into networks she could never comprehend, but desperately wanted to exploit for his approval. For Resnick, even from his cell, even as an exposed asset, he held her like a marionette, and she let him. That evening, I held Max close in the living room, his bony shoulders trembling beneath my hands as I spoke. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the room dim with shadows that seemed to pulse with each ragged breath he took. "You won't see Mom for a while," I told him softly. "Did I do something wrong?" He whispered, his voice breaking in that sharp, shattering way only children's voices can when the world proves itself cruel. "No, champ," I said. And though I tried to hold the words steady, they cracked at the edges, splintered by grief and fury and a mercy I could no longer find for her. "You did everything right." She didn't. That night, I tucked them into bed, smoothing Lily's curls across her pillow, brushing Max's hair back from his forehead until his eyes finally fluttered shut. I stood in their doorway long after sleep claimed them, my sidearm heavy at my hip eyes, scanning the quiet dark, every muscle locked into silent vigilance. Because a fortress isn't just walls and sensors and reinforced locks. A fortress is the sentinel who stands guard long after hope dies. A fortress is vigilance without end. love without mercy for the enemy. And sometimes, God help us, the enemy shares your blood. That night, after the report was filed and the final signature burned into digital permanence, I sat alone in the dark, the only light in my office coming from the muted glow of 2 small security feeds. Max shifted in his sleep, tangled in Star Wars sheets, his small face scrunched with dreams I prayed remained innocent. He mumbled my name, reaching out to the empty air beside him, seeking comfort even in unconsciousness. Across the screen, Lily lay curled tight beneath her pink blanket, thumb pressed against her lips. Her hair fanned around her like a fallen halo. The quiet hum of the camera feeds filled the silence like a heartbeat. They trusted me, to keep them safe, to build walls strong enough to keep out the monsters. But how do you protect your children from the person who gave them life? How do you armor them against betrayal etched into their bloodline? There was no training module for this, no standard operating procedure for defending your children from their own mother. My chest tightened around a rage too large to name a black, choking fury that felt older than language. She hadn't just broken me. She hadn't just torn apart our marriage or left me bleeding in an empty house. She had reached into the only untouched place I had left my children and turned it into a battlefield. She used them as tools, as leverage, as assets. Every gentle moment, every spoonful of yogurt she fed Lily, every time she braided curls back from their daughter's trusting eyes, it wasn't love. It was strategy. It was operational gain cloaked in maternal devotion. I pressed my fists against the edge of my desk until pain spiked through my knuckles and the wood creaked beneath my grip. The fortress I had built of walls and protocols of sidearms and reinforced locks of bedtime stories whispered with love that tasted of blood and sand had been breached again, this time from within. From hands that once wore my ring, the fortress would have to be rebuilt, higher, stronger, colder, impenetrable. Outside, the night crept toward dawn with quiet inevitability, the sky paling from pitch black to bruised blue. As the first light cut thin lines across the blinds, striping my office with sterile gold, I closed my eyes and whispered a silent vow into the sleeping house around me. No one will ever infiltrate us again. No matter what part of me I have to kill to keep them safe. And in that moment, I felt something inside me fold in on itself. A warmth gone out. A final door locked. Because love is a fortress, yes. But so is vengeance. And I would stand watch forever. Morning came with the taste of metal on my tongue, acrid and bitter as blood from a split lip. I woke before the alarm could shriek through the silence. My body knew there was no sleep left for men like me, only guarded hours behind closed eyes. Only the faint echo of rest that never reached bone. The sky beyond the blinds bled slowly from black into the color of old bruises, deep purple fading into sickly gray. I brewed coffee so black it tasted like scorched earth steam curling around my face as I leaned against the counter and watched the security feeds flicker across my laptop screen. Driveway clear, street empty, front porch sensor green, rear perimeter sensor green. Thermal overlays showed nothing but the slow pulse of neighborhood stray cats slipping between hedges. The fortress stood intact. For now. At MFSU headquarters, the air smelled of dry erase markers, burnt printer toner, and the recycled exhale of 100 weary analysts. I sat in the briefing room beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like insects trapped in glass. Agent Walsh clicked through the morning's intel slides with his usual grave efficiency. Fragments from Resnick's interrogations. Broken code phrases muttered between split lips. New operational assets flagged for activation. Each code name etched in military block font across the screen pressed down on my chest like a cold stone. My lungs burned from holding in the scream rising there. Because the war didn't end when I unpinned my badge or locked away my uniform. It didn't stay overseas. It moved closer each day, slipping beneath my front door like poison gas. It moved into my children's bedroom.